I know. I always wish that I got into radio.
Just to be
But
the
in
guy.
a way, podcasting is kind of the new version of radio.
Yeah, it's internet radio.
But I also kind of wanted, like, to be able to play music, too, without getting, copyrighted,
I wanted to be able to have do a voice like this. 95.6 The Wolf. Like
I couldn't keep that up for, like, however long.
Yeah, you're right. I can't either.
3-4 hours, whatever it is.
Yeah, well, but I mean, a lot of times them DJs, they don't talk a lot. They just, introduce the next song, or they might say a little anecdote. But then,
I don't have that spontaneity that I think a lot of DJs have. But then, there's some who just kind of talk about whatever. They don't have like those.
It's like do you ever see the quips? You ever see the bootleg version of Almost Famous, and it shows the guy from Tenacious D.
Yeah, Kyle Gass.
Yeah, as the DJ, they go to a radio station, and he's supposed to interview them.
And he passes out.
And he's like,
he passes out.
Yeah.
And they just keep talking.
Or the best,
literally passed out.
Or the best DJ scene in a movie, which is Wayne's World. Second Wayne's World, when they're supposed to go do that interview about Wayne stock, and the guy's like not listening. He's like, "We could call you a complete tool, and you wouldn't even know." All right, handsome Dan. But okay, we're off to a great start here on the
go off to a great start.
Cinema Discovery.
Let's get back on track.
Cinema Discovery Project. We're back again here for another episode. We hope everybody's doing fantastic. And as usual, I'm Stephen Billings, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Andrew Cabral. How you doing?
I'm doing good. We are back here. This is episode number 27. I always ask Stephen what it is because I can never keep track.
Yes, he always
not the best
asks.
thing
I can
in the world
confirm
for a
this.
co-host.
It's okay.
It's okay. But yeah, this episode, as you can tell by the title, will be another spotlight. And the spotlight's going to be on Shallow Grave, the Danny Boyle film from 1994. And the reason why we wanted to do it is because it's the 25th anniversary of the release of that film. Before we get into it.
That and Danny Boyle's freaking awesome.
That is true. He's a very, very good director.
There's a lot of firsts. There's a lot of firsts in this movie.
Yeah.
So
there is a lot of firsts in this movie. But before we get into the main topic, which is that we have some sad news to report in the passing of director John Singleton, who is someone we talked about when we did our kind of episode on the black directors in cinema.
Yeah.
And he's one of the few who has risen to prominence over the last 30 years or so. And he sadly passed away literally today, a few hours ago, right before we are recording. And his debut film was, of course, Boys in the Hood, which is probably the film he's most notorious for, most known for. And he had a stroke, I believe, on April 17th, and it just kind of went down from there.
Yeah. They had him on life support.
Yeah,
and
he was in like a medically induced coma, or just in a coma in general. And today his family decided to take him off life support, and he passed away a few hours ago. And really, really sad because it was abrupt, and he's young. He's at the relative young age of 51 years old, which is very young these days. And he was still readily active in the film community. He was producing a lot of things, and he had just had his hands in a lot of areas, not necessarily actively directing feature films, but he was a prominent figure in getting things off the ground, whether it be on television or in the the cinematic world. So he is a big, heavy loss. Yeah, you just never know, like, when these people that we know in the film industry or TV industry or whatever, or music industry, are going to pass away. We kind of always forget that they're also human as well, and they're also here for a limited amount of time, like ourselves.
I just feel like this short, we're 4 months into the year. I feel like this has already happened a bunch. The last few episodes we've had these untimely deaths happening a lot this year.
2019 has been
it's been rough.
Pretty rough for deaths of well-known people in the film world, and man,
I don't know if it's just because we're getting older and finally the people that we grew up with or now getting to that age. But like you said, I mean, John Singleton still very young. I mean, it's
still really, really shockingly passing away too soon. If you want more about kind of his, I guess, filmography and his career, I think we went into it.
We went into him relatively
well.
Yeah.
In our episode about black directors and filmmakers who have risen to prominence. But yeah, so man, it's not the best way to start an episode, but it seems to be what we do.
If somebody, maybe even though this is sad, maybe this will give people a reason to look into his stuff and keep his memory alive.
Boys in the Hood is an unprecedented film. It's one of the best films of the '90s. Probably.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, didn't he co-wrote? He also didn't Ice Cube co-write that with him? I'm pretty sure.
Let me look. I know it's one of maybe Ice Cube's first movie role.
Yeah, it's his first.
At the time, he was still a prominent rapper or whatnot.
Yeah.
It was written by John Singleton.
Oh, okay.
Of course, the film starred Cuba Gooding Jr.
Maybe I'm thinking. I think I'm thinking of
Morris
Friday.
Chestnut.
He wrote Friday.
I think you may be right.
Yeah.
I think that's F. Gary Gray who did Friday.
He directed that. Yeah.
Yes.
But it's a bad loss. But on other news, I guess maybe more uplifting news. Not really uplifting, but Avengers broke a bunch of records.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to bring this
up.
I
just figured we'd just bring it up real quick.
It is important. It's important because it is cinematic history, whether you like it or not, or whether you're into those movies or not. It's significant because it's never been done before in this way. Just absolutely decimating all of the opening box office records for an opening weekend. And movies already
it was like in the
$1 billion.
It was like 350 opening weekend domestically,
right?
Over $1 billion, like at 1.2 billion worldwide in the open. It's crazy,
which is insane considering the overall leader of all time, I believe, is Avatar, which is sitting at about 2.8.
Yeah.
Entire box office take. So does it have a chance to beat it? It does.
It's possible.
We'll see.
It's just a matter of repeat viewings. And the fact that the movie is 3 hours long might hurt it. Because
I don't know if it is, man.
Well, the thing is, you got to think as the weeks go on, less theaters are gonna show this movie.
Not only that, but you won't get the same. Theaters won't be open 24 hours.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
They won't have 4 a.m. screenings.
The availability is going to go down.
Yeah, the availability of it will shrink in terms of show times.
Yeah,
but I think for people's fervor to see it or see it multiple times, I don't think that's going to go away. At least in the first 2.
I think it's going to make it to 2 billion, but I don't think it's going to make it Avatar big.
Right.
Yeah, that's my prediction.
It's unprecedented. There was so much anticipation for it that you kind of knew that was going to blow the doors off the box office. This is a culmination of 11 years of a franchise, 22 films in its entirety, and it's unprecedented to try to pull that off, to have that large of a cinematic universe and to have it all kind of interlock with one another and then kind of have a culminating final event. I know we've had franchises in the past. We've had franchises going back, decades and decades and decades, but never to this extent, never this many films.
Yeah, the closest...
Granted, we've had, horror franchises where
they don't count. They're not that intricate.
Friday the 13th and Part 8. You know what I mean? Part 7.
Nah.
It's they're not... It's not the same. They're just kind of movies sharing the same title. The biggest continuity.
Yeah, the biggest we've had before this was Harry Potter.
Yeah, Harry Potter did have 8 films. That, obviously were all part of the same world, all sequels to one another, all connected by the characters and whatnot. But this is even more varying because you had different films with different characters set in the same world, as opposed to Harry Potter, which had the same characters in each film. Yeah. It's really remarkable. Now, granted, are these films amazing cinematic achievements? When it comes to whatever people whatever the subjectivity of the way people view films, perhaps not. You know what I mean? These are large blockbuster popcorn eating films. This isn't films by these aren't art house films. These aren't films that are made to be aesthetic art pieces at times. You know what I mean? They're for probably basic entertainment purposes. Doesn't mean that they're not good for what they are, which I think they are. I mean, I've been engrossed in them for 11 years, so I obviously think there's somewhat value in them. But I know that here on the Cinema Discovery Project, we like to, really dig down deep and find kind of the hidden gems and find, a lot of the less celebrated films. But you also kind of have to realize that the more celebrated and mainstream films do have value as well.
They do.
They're just different. There's different values.
Definitely different values, and but everything affects each other. These big movies affect the smaller movies. So
yeah, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively.
Yeah.
All depending on the situation. But with all that being said, Steven, you want to get into Shallow Grave? You want to get into a shallow grave?
I don't necessarily want to be in one. I would rather be cremated. So you don't have to. You don't have to put me in a grave.
I'll remember that if I'm around when the time comes.
Okay, thank you.
Good to know. Good to know. It's always good to plan ahead.
Yes.
Unlike the characters in this film who kind of just did things in the moment, which can lead to negative results happening. But before we get into it, I do want to say the reason why we're doing this, because it is the 25th anniversary of the release of this film. It's Danny Boyle's first feature film. It's also the feature film debut for Ewan McGregor as a lead. And he looks very young in this film, but he also looks almost exactly the same now. It's very interesting how much he has not aged.
He honestly hasn't aged very much. Yeah.
No, not really at all. And he definitely shows a lot of ability as an actor that we obviously know more of now. But it also stars Christopher Eccleston, who of course has gone on to be in many, many films. He also was one of the Doctor Who's. I think he was the 9th Doctor when they revived Doctor Who several years ago. They're now up to whatever. But yeah, and also the film also stars Kerry Fox as well. And yeah, this is a low-budget film. This is a film I believe was shot in Glasgow, Scotland. And yeah, getting into it right away, it feels so Danny Boyle-ish. If you know Danny Boyle, especially like 90s Danny Boyle. Like, just the opening of this movie is so electric and energized.
Yeah,
with the music and the camera moving down the streets.
Yeah, he moves the camera
all this kind
a
of
lot.
Stuff.
Yeah,
a lot. And his films have at least this movie and Trainspotting have such energy to them. You know what I mean? I feel like these two movies are somewhat connected because they have that same vibe to them.
Well, I think even though it does have that Danny Boyle stamp already there, I think this is still one of the more, I would say, one of the more tamer directing that he's done. Like, there is a lot of just shots that just sit there too.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you could tell are very budget constrained. Yeah. He didn't have a lot to work with in terms of money.
Especially the apartment itself.
It's very bare.
It's very bare
and wide open.
The walls are very just one color.
Yeah, the movie's really only set in 3 or 4 places.
Yeah, there's really not a lot of
mostly just in the apartment, so it plays very much like a play.
Yeah,
if you think about it, because of the limited amounts of location. And before we get into it, we are going to spoil everything about this movie. It technically didn't open here in the United States until 1995, but we'll go with when its original date actually opened, which was apparently in December of 1994. So they got it right in under that year.
Yeah.
It actually first opened in Australia, of all places. It didn't open in the UK until January 6th of 1995, but it opened in Australia in 1994. So technically, that's where it is. So we'll call it 25 years.
Yeah,
that's a good place.
Yeah, it sounds good.
But yeah, so opening up here is we have these 3 friends or flatmates portrayed by
as
Ewan McGregor,
they
Christopher
call
Eccleston,
what they call
Harry Fox.
studio apartments.
Yeah, flats
here.
in apartment flats are like code for an apartment in the UK.
Studio apartment.
Right.
A more open plan where there's like, usually a wide open kind of living room area that flows.
It's usually like, Yeah, it's usually cheaper, I think.
It's usually cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah, they're usually cheaper and like wide open spaces, and yeah. So they're trying to and each character. Let me get the character names, so we don't keep calling them by their actor names.
Yeah.
So Kerry Fox is Juliet, Christopher Eccleston is David, and Ewan McGregor is Alex. So they're trying to find a fourth flatmate because I guess they have an empty room. And so the movie starts off with kind of a series of a montage series of like them interviewing different people and just messing around with them, just screwing with them. They're asking them these absurd questions, like how do you perform a satanic ritual, or how do you listen to this artist and then name 3 of their top 5 hits, or all kind of different things like, oh, are you divorced, are you this, are you that,
and then they
whatever.
would take pictures with all of them,
They would take pictures. They're just messing with them, and you get the feeling that these people are just kind of jerks, kind of asses. Especially the first guy that they do, Cameron, who's seems like a timid young man, and they just laugh him out of the apartment.
Yeah,
because they're like, this guy's just a dweeb, he's not cool. He's not.
Alex will regret it later.
He will. He will regret it later.
But yeah, you get this idea that they're kind of they're fun, but they're a little bit jerks. But the big thing is you get this closeness between the 3. That they're really they're really good friends.
You see them go out on the town. You see that they like to play racquetball. I think that's what it was. And Alex and David will play, and then Juliet came in, and the gist you get is that Juliet ended up beating Alex, and they kind of, they all laugh about it. They have a very, like you said, closeness to them.
But there's also there's a little bit of a sexual tension with, of course, having a female and 2 guys. The Alex character seems to have the hots for Juliet.
Yeah, there is that kind of right off the bat, but there's almost a platonic nature to all 3 of them. She obviously feels comfortable with them enough to, I believe one of the early scenes in the movie, just her topless, walking out of
she's in the bathroom changing, and he gets the mail, and I don't think she necessarily wanted to be topless in front of Alex,
right.
But she does it, I think, partially out of being annoyed and not caring, but also being maybe somewhat flirtatious, just because.
Well, the reason why I say somewhat platonic in this situation, because there's no extra stuff that you typically see in a scene like that, oh, I didn't notice that, or there will be a longing look from the Alex character, or something like that. There'll be something there, you know what I mean, something extra that would deem it to be. I
think she knows,
teasing or sexual in any way.
I think she knows that he likes her, but it is kind of making it tough on him.
yeah, and I think it's also something that kind of feeds into this that you notice, at least I noticed right off the bat, is there's a sense of competition in the film.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, between specifically the 2 males in this triumvirate between Alex and David, with just the racquetball scene.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's very interesting how the film plays on the idea of the male ego and alpha maleism and things like that, which kind of grows even more so as the film goes along.
As the kind of the crux of the movie makes its way in.
Yeah,
it changes the dynamics.
Yeah, there's something that happens very, very early in the movie where they do find a fourth person to take the room. Well, typically Juliet finds this person, and this guy's name is Hugo. Yeah. And he's apparently a novelist, a writer. They all have all the characters in the film have actually very defined careers that they really kind of go out of the way to establish as being part of their identities.
Yeah.
Juliet is a doctor.
Yeah.
David is a lawyer, and Alex is a journalist, or he works for a newspaper. So it's interesting how I think all of those 3 kind of fit into their characters, especially the David character, because he's the most straight edged, like
Yeah.
stoic, conservative, I guess the term is. I don't know, like playing by the rules. Like at one point, early on in the film, he, like I think it was one of his bosses, like upper bosses, like wanted to take a case.
Well, yeah,
or do something.
This is later. This is I think
Is this later? Okay,
I think
we'll
it's
get
a little
to it,
bit
we'll get to
later.
it.
Yeah.
But anywho, so the fourth guy is this guy named Hugo, novelist, writer, or whatever, and Juliet interviews him, and they have this, like you say, kind of flirtatious back and forth, this
Yeah.
kind of chemistry back and forth. He even like answers the phone. She tells him to answer the phone. Just tell him I'm not here, right? And he does it, and then they have this great kind of back and forth.
Yeah, I think she looks at him and sees an intellectual of sorts. Being like,
oh yeah, he definitely comes off that way.
Yeah, he comes off that way. So I think that's why she wants him in the house, is because I think she's somewhat interested in him, compared to the other two men that are already in the flat.
Who are kind of the complete opposites.
Yeah.
One's kind of more carefree, and one is serious.
Yeah.
So this guy's kind of somewhat in the middle, I guess.
Yeah. She's definitely I think selfishly wanting to bring him in for her own reasons.
A romantic edge to that.
Yeah.
So there's a dinner scene where they have to meet him, and they decide that I guess
he's
he can
good.
stay.
He has money, and Ewan McGregor sniffs his money.
Yeah.
He's like, it does smell like it smells like the real thing.
Oh yeah, because they ask him, like, can you pay? And he just like whips out like all these pounds.
Yeah.
They call it the British, currency. All these bills of pounds. I don't know if they call them bills.
Pounds.
I guess
it's
pounds.
pounds.
I think they call them notes. Pound notes.
Maybe. Does it really matter? Does it really matter?
No. Well.
It does.
It's about to matter in a second.
Because
he moves in, and
suddenly during this scene, the David character asks him, "Have you ever killed anybody?" And he's like, "No," but then you get a flash to him and somebody else beating up some old man at an ATM, and that's where you start to now something about this character you didn't know before. So obviously this new roommate is a criminal of some kind,
and that leads to kind of plays into the overall style of the film, when it has that kinetic editing to it, and the cutaways like you just said of him.
Well, the one
go on.
Yeah, the one thing about it is it's unless you're really paying attention, it's hard to know necessarily because the cutaways are not done in any very distinct way.
No.
They're very much like
abrupt.
Very abrupt, and stylistically they don't look different than the scene you were just in. It seems like you don't know, you have to really be paying attention to know that this is a flashback of sorts.
Right.
So I think this is definitely Danny Boyle figuring out his style in this movie.
And
later on, visually, he would get a little bit more
defined
and more experimental. And
yeah, for sure. But getting back to the plot, so Hugo moves in, and I think Alex, so it's the morning, and then Alex comes down and says, "Hey, has anybody seen him?" And she's like, and Juliet's like, "No." And then she asks David, David says, "No, I haven't seen him." So they basically, don't they just wait like a whole day, and he still hasn't come out?
Yeah,
of the room.
Yeah, so they decide they want to break into the room.
They look through like the window that's on top of the door, and they say, "Hey," and Alex says like, "Hey, it's your flatmate, whatever, just." And he's like, "Oh, I don't think anybody's in there."
Yeah.
And then Juliet says, "Oh, the key is still. I can see the key through the keyhole on the other side." So she's like, "Oh, just break it down." So they have this is another thing where they have like the kind of this male dominance competition here, where like Alex tries to kick it in and he can't do it. So he's like, "David, why don't you try?" And then David tries to do it. So they both end up doing it. But it's another kind of small instance of competing with one another.
Yeah.
So they break him in, and then they see that he is dead.
Yeah.
Not only is he dead, but he's just lying sprawled out naked on the bed.
Yeah.
Just dead. And what we learned from the scene is I think that he kind of OD'd on heroin, I assume,
it
or
seems
some type of drug.
The thing is the drugs
They
weren't.
never really say.
The drugs weren't near him.
No,
They were
his
in a drawer. Yeah.
So yeah, there was no needle or anything like that they found, or drug paraphernalia that was out. But it looks like he died somehow. Maybe it was a heart attack.
It was probably an OD. I just think it was a little bit weird that it was tucked away already.
Yeah, not only that, because usually unfortunately when people overdose, it happens very quickly, like right after they shoot up heroin. That's unfortunately what happened to the late Philip Seymour Hoffman, where they literally found him with the needle still in his arm. How graphic that is. And they've shown that in movies and TV shows many, many times. And so he's dead, and so Juliet's a doctor, so she's inspecting him or whatever. She covers him up. And Alex, who has absolutely no sense of decorum or morality, just snooping around, just going through his
don't
drawer,
you want to know
why?
And he's the one that finds
checking it out.
Yeah, he's the one that finds the needles and the.
Yeah, but he's like going through like his clothes and his jacket, and then he pulls out the suitcase. And by this point, Juliet is going into the other room because they're gonna call the police to get the body out of there.
Yeah,
and she's on the phone with the emergency people, and he walks in. You don't see the money right away. It's done very well, where he just opens it, and there's a look of like awe on his face, and you don't know what's in the suitcase. You don't know what he's looking at until the way they do it is kind of almost a POV shot of him walking towards her, but it's not quite POV because it's somewhat in the frame.
It's from the viewpoint of Ewan McGregor walking towards her.
And then she turns and she sees all the money. Then she hangs up. So now we get to the main moral crux of the plot.
Yeah. This is what changes the characters for good.
This changes everything.
Yeah. As greed does to a lot of people.
Yes. It's one of the biggest themes of the movie is greed. And more specifically, how greed corrupts you and turns you into something you never knew you were going to be. And it's very interesting how the film shifts from here on and how these characters kind of descend into kind of madness, if you will, a little bit.
Yeah.
So basically, they don't know what to do with the money. They basically have this kind of argument or conversation. It's like, basically Alex wants to keep it. David wants to, call it in. And I think Juliet is kind of, she says she wants to call the police, but then Alex challenges her to do it, and she kind of freezes. So she doesn't do it. And then kind of like time goes by, and the body, and you get shots of the body just like still in the bed, just like lying there because they haven't disposed of it yet. And the way that it's shot and the way that it's just played off in the film is rather comedic, but it's dark comedy. It's black comedy. This movie's kind of a black comedy crime drama film, if that makes any sense. And the comedy comes from the absurdity of this situation where they're just leaving this dead body there while they figure out what to do. So basically the end of it, their final is this the part where this is the part where David sees his boss, and the boss is like, hey, we want you to do this work because you're exactly the type of man we like around here. Boring. Essentially boring. And so he's like in the law library, and he's just looking at everybody just going around doing their work, kind of like like drones, if you will. Their lives are just kind of buried in their work. It's just not a good way to live, essentially. So he's kind of just sitting there, and it's ruminating in his head about this money and about what to do, and basically comes to the conclusion that he wants to keep the money. So now this leads to, okay, what do we do with the body? And they decide they're going to get rid of the body. They're going to dispose of it in the way in which you would find gangsters disposing of bodies, or serial killers disposing of bodies, or just kind of psychotic people in general disposing of bodies.
Yeah, they decide they want to cut the feet off, cut the head off.
They're gonna dismember it and bury it out in the woods.
Yeah.
And there's a scene, and it's played. We sound like the way I'm describing it is like it sounds dark and like morbid or horrific. No, it's played lightly in the film.
Yeah.
Specifically through the character of Alex, who, while they're going through like this hardware store, he's like, okay, we're gonna need this hammer, we're gonna need this saw. Oh yeah, that'll be a good one to saw, and we're gonna need a spade. Don't you think we need a spade? Yeah, we'll get 2 of them. You know what I mean? And it's just like, and then and David's like, no, I don't really want to do it. Like, I don't feel comfortable doing it. And it's like, what are you talking about? We all agreed we would all do it equally. So basically, they all share, the responsibility.
Yeah.
They all share, I guess the blame, if you will, or whatever. So none of them can hold over one responsibility to another. So I guess they all agreed upon doing it. And so while and what is interesting is before they dispose of the body, Juliet says she doesn't want to take part in it either, and they decide that they're gonna draw straws to see who does what. I think.
Yeah.
And David draws the short straw, so he's going to be cutting up the body, I believe, because they want to cut the hands and feet off, have those incinerated in an incinerator, and then buried like the rest of it or whatever. But they also want to
they pull the teeth too. Any way in the ways that you identify a body. Yeah. Yeah,
and they want to mangle the face so that it's unidentifiable if it's ever found. It's really dark stuff. Really dark stuff. And so David has to do it, and Alex is going to be digging, and Juliet I don't think is going to be. She actually ends up disposing of the hands and feet.
Yeah.
So there's a cut here, and I want, and Stephen, maybe you can help me here. There's a cross-cutting sequence that happens with them disposing of the body, like taking it out of the room and putting it and bagging it up, putting it in the van, putting all the supplies away, all that stuff, and with someone being interrogated as to where the whereabouts are of this Hugo character. And the way in which it's cross-cutted, I think, is very interesting, because the way the transition is from one scene to the other, at least initially, is they're dunking the guy's head into this bathtub that has red water in it, but it's like this pinkish red water in it.
Yeah.
And it's they're just torturing the guy. They actually end up killing the guy, and they don't get the information that they're looking for. But it leads us to kind of believe that Hugo was into something that wasn't exactly legal.
He was.
He wasn't just a writer.
No, he obviously with having all that money, he was into some. We already knew he was a criminal of some kind, because we'd already seen the flash to him killing somebody
he did have drugs on him.
Yeah.
So perhaps he was involved in some type of
maybe
dealing.
Maybe he did a job and decided to take the money for himself.
Yeah, a double cross.
Either left his partners out to dry, or the people that he owed the money to are now coming after him. So.
Right, and who knows if Hugo was even. Well, I mean, maybe it probably was his real name if they're using it, but so yeah, there's a great cross cutting there, and then there's the scene of them digging, which always was very interesting to me, even when I watched the film for the first time a few years ago. And very interesting to me now, just the way in which it's done, to the point where you don't see any of the gore at all.
Yeah.
It's done in silhouette with this bright red background, and just these colors, and just what you see is, you'll see David just sawing away, but you won't see what the saw is actually sawing. You won't see the body. You don't see the blood. You don't see nothing. It's just his expression and the aggression that's in it, and just what the anguish that he's in to get this done. And the same thing kind of with Alex when he's digging. and Juliet's off to the side, kind of nervously smoking a cigarette, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful moment because up until this point, we must believe that none of these people have ever done this before. This isn't something that they're equipped to necessarily do. So they're put in this really extraordinarily dark situation that is completely foreign to them. And now we're seeing how much that takes out of them. I think kind of like chips away at their humanity because we see it right away.
Well, yeah.
Right, like the scene right after.
Well, yeah, but especially David.
Yeah, David is the most disturbed by what is happening right now.
Yeah.
Because I think maybe he is the most straight-laced, that this kind of shatters his world more so than with Alex, or even more so than with Juliet, who deals with kind of human bodies and human biology on a daily basis because she's a doctor, so she understands how,
well, I mean, you see how
the human body can be.
Well, you see how she reacts when they find the body in the first place. She doesn't get upset. She just is like, well, I see this all the time. That's what dead bodies look like.
Wasn't there even like there was a line at one point in the movie where Alex goes, "You're a doctor, don't you kill people for a living?" or something like that, and I was like, that's not necessarily 100% true, but okay. And so the next scene is you get that lovely close up of David's face, and there's just it's moving in 360 degrees around the frame. And you just see that there's something wrong with him mentally. You can see it in his eyes. He's kind of broken in some way now. And this is when the film descends even more into, his psychosis. He's really the one, like we said, who takes it the worst.
And so that what they do is they put the money up in the attic.
Well, he does that.
Yeah.
He kind of he kind of does that himself, where he takes the money, and it's an attic, but it's also called a loft because because it's like a crawl space. You can't really live up there, but he does it, and he puts it in a plastic bag. He wraps it up with duct tape to kind of seal it, and he puts it in this container up there that has water in it. And I'm not quite sure what this container is.
It might be some kind of something to do with maybe the toilets, the toilet system or something like that. I don't know, something to do with the air conditioning or something to I don't know. But
yeah, he's basically doing it out of paranoia, and he kind of does it, I think, as a way for their well-being or whatever, because he can kind of, I guess he very much
I mean he went through with everything, but now he's too afraid to want to even spend the money. He thinks that they could get caught. Now he's afraid to get caught for what they've done. So now
yes he does. Yeah, he is. So he's very, like I said, paranoid. And there's another scene in there somewhere of these two gangster type guys roughing up another person. They have somebody in a freezer or whatever to give up to find the whereabouts of Hugo. I have to say that's one of the weaker parts of the movie for me, because they never really tell you how they find out where Hugo went or who, or there's just kind of two scenes with these guys and then they kind of just show up.
Because they get rid of Hugo's car. He tosses it off. They send it over a cliff into a quarry.
Yeah, they get rid of Hugo's car. Kind of dump it out. And then there's another scene in there where Alex and Juliet go on a bit of a shopping spree, where they buy a
they dip into the money.
They dip into the money, which I think is what leads David to put it away, because when he returns, he goes, how much did this cost? How much did this cost?
Yeah, the camera.
They're like, I don't know. And she goes 500 pounds, 500 British pounds. And he's like, 500 pounds. And he starts freaking out about it.
Yeah,
because typically, I've seen this in many movies and TV shows. When people come into a big lump sum of money illegally, the first thing you're not supposed to spend it a lot because that's very suspicious.
Yeah, but you got to be able to explain.
Well, there's that. I mean, we're going a little off track here, but there's the scene in Goodfellas after the Lufthansa heist, where they tell the people who are involved, don't make any big cash, purchases, and then like one dude buys a car, and then the other guy buys like a fur coat for his wife, and it's like, and Robert De Niro's like, what are you doing? You can't be doing this, because that's how they get you. And so he's very paranoid about this. And that's when he goes up to the attic and he starts living up there. Maybe to protect the money or to hide away, we're not quite sure. But they become, Juliet and Alex become concerned, I guess, about his mental health. And they decide that, at one point they decide that they want to check up on him. But that happens later in the film. I'm getting off track. I think I'm getting off track, but anyway,
there's a part where they go to a party.
There we go. Go to the party part. Yeah,
that's
a good part.
Yeah, and he's not. David's of course not really having a good time. It's not really his scene. He's also of course still very distraught of the whole situation. But Juliet and David or Alex, are having a good time and dancing and. They finally kind of get him to loosen up. David yells at some random dude who wants to try to talk to Juliet.
Oh, he does. It's this guy's called Brian, and he was the one who actually coincidentally called on the phone earlier in the film.
Yeah.
And he blows up at him, but this is the scene where Alex and Juliet, I think, get closer romantically. I don't know if you saw that, but I saw it.
Yeah, you do.
They dance with one another, and
she sees a sense of strength in him that she didn't see before, I think.
Well, I meant Alex. I meant the Ewan McGregor character.
Yeah.
Because they dance and they have this kind of flirtatious vibe.
Well, I think it's both. I think both.
Or both. Yeah.
I think both Alex and Alex definitely in the scene with the dance, and she she comes up to him while he's on the floor, and she,
That's the one I'm talking. That's the scene I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Where she kind of steps on his chest playfully.
Yeah.
And then there's this look between one another that's very.
And he kisses her on the on the leg, the foot. But then when that scene happens where David blows up at the random, I guess, ex-boyfriend or date that she went on with. Yeah, I think she sees a different side to him, and I think there's a little bit, you see it in her face where she's just kind of like in awe of the person she didn't realize, because he's always very timid and very, inside his own head, and I think that she obviously is now kind of like. I think she looks at him a little differently too. So but in that moment, I think her and Alex are kind of starting to,
Right. And this is the scene. And this is the moment where the young gentleman Cameron comes back in the scene because he's like working as a waiter there, or he's just working there at this thing, and they call him over, and then they just kind of laugh him off away again. Yeah. And then Cameron,
particularly Alex, does it.
Yeah, then Cameron and a bunch of dudes confront Alex in the bathroom and beat him up. Yeah. They beat him up, which he probably deserves.
Yeah.
But this is also the scene that started off because it's a charity event, and it's a charity event to raise money for like 6 children. And Alex goes, "I hate children. Let them die." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." But that's like kind of the dark humor that character has, and that this film has in general. So yeah. So, and then the scene transitions to her, to Juliet, like fixing his face and whatnot, because his nose got all messed up. And this is when, and I think that we're getting very close to when these other 2 guys show up.
Yes, yeah. Well, this is when the other 2 criminals. He's up. David's up inside the loft, and then these 2 guys show up and start. Going right away, just going right at him. They put a bag over Alex's head and they start hitting him in the shins with a bat.
They tie up Juliet.
Yeah.
Put
her sweater over her head.
Yep.
And then Alex kind of screams out that the money's up in the loft.
Right.
And
so they obviously see the the ladder.
Yeah.
The ladder there that goes up to the loft.
And one guy goes up, and all you hear is a thud. You know.
He goes up there, and you see David like behind some beam or something. He's got the hammer, and then that's when you hear the thud, and then the other guy goes up, and
gets thrown down.
He gets killed too.
Well, he gets killed, and then you just see him get thrown down into the floor below, through the hole. Yeah.
Yeah, he goes down, then David throws the other guy down, and then he goes down and he
starts to inspect the body.
Things. But in that moment, you could have easily had David snap and try to kill his flatmates. Like he's like that off kilter at this point. Like he just committed like 2 murders. I mean,
and didn't really bat an eye. Yeah.
Yeah, you can know what he's capable of. So basically, he gets thrown. Yeah, so now they have to dispose of these 2 bodies again. So now they've got to go back out to the woods.
But this time they don't really show you. They just kind of show them driving out there, because you assume that now that was so easy for David, this will be
done. Yeah. And the way it's done, like there's a sense of like foreboding or a sense of dread, to where there's no dialogue that happens.
Yeah.
Like there's no dialogue that happens between the friends. They just kind of cut to them sitting in the car driving out to the woods. There's like a wide shot of the car driving, into the woods, or by the woods, and then there's just another cut, I believe, of David just with that red vibrant background and that silhouette of him just sawing away, just like aggressively sawing away. And yeah, so this guy's even farther down the road of insanity, if you will. Like he's even more broken now. And this is when the film, goes even more so, because this is when we're getting kind of the final third act of the film. The film is not very long. The film only is about 93 minutes or so it's a very short film and very easily for us to kind of digest. But as you can tell, there's a lot of things happening in this movie for such a short film. And it happens very quickly and very, from moment to moment. There's no, what I like to call, fat in this film. Yeah. Like kind of extra scenes you don't really need, just like throwaway scenes that don't serve the plot.
The plot
this movie's cut to the bone.
The plot itself is a very simple plot. I mean, it's not. Yeah, you don't spend a lot of time in their everyday lives, and like you said, there's only a few different sets. A few different locations in this movie. So they when it's your first feature, a lot of times the best thing to do is to do something simple. Something you can only need a few locations for and only a few actors, because really this whole movie only has maybe 10 actors.
Yeah, maybe, and like not many with actual speaking roles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's 3 main leads, and the rest are kind of very supporting.
Yeah, they're in and out. They're minuscule. I mean, the guy who started this whole, downward spiral is only in like 2 scenes before he dies. You know what I mean? So yeah, what we also learned, I can't remember if it's after this or if it was before the 2 dudes showed up. Maybe it was after, is that Juliet buys a plane ticket to Rio de Janeiro.
I think it was right after this. Yeah.
I think it was right after this. Yeah, where obviously she is,
thinking about jumping ship.
She's about jumping ship,
but
and
then
she. Yeah, go on.
I was gonna say, then this is when the cops start to get involved.
Yeah, the cops start circling around now, because they first show up because there's at one point during the film there's a burglary in one of the apartments below them. So they show up and they talk to David, who of course at this point looks suspicious as all hell about anything, and they question him about it, and this was the point where Juliet and Alex were meeting up in like some park because they were concerned about Alex's, mental health. This is what I was getting at earlier, which I was way too soon. And they decided to go and kind of have like an intervention, I guess, with him, or just talk to him. Yeah. Alex doesn't want to do it because he's like, the last time someone went up there to see him, they ended up dead. And so, but he eventually decides to do it. So they return back to the flat, and he goes up there and he's like, "Hey, just buddy, I just want to talk to you, man. Just calm down. I just want to just talk to you very peacefully, like." And he goes up there, and David's not there. David's not there, but he finds where the money is. And he's looking around. Like apparently David had a mattress up there, and he's looking around, but David is in some other part of the flat, and he comes up and he grabs Juliet and he covers her mouth. And the way it's done is really well done. It is yet again a POV shot of just the camera getting closer and closer and closer, as if someone running towards Juliet, and he just grabs her. And he basically says he tells Juliet, tell him to look for the money, and she does, and he's like, "Oh, that's what I'm doing." But Alex eventually finds it in the bag in that water container. But then he comes down the stairs, and you can see he has his hands behind him, and he's kind of wiping the wetness off of his hands, because I don't think he wants David to know that he knows where the money is.
Yeah.
And David is like, who have you been talking to? Like, who are your friends? And this because the police showed up right before this. Well, so now he's spooked beyond.
Well, also when what we forgot is what happened just before this is that he drilled all them holes in the ceiling.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He drilled all these essentially peepholes in the ceiling so he can
keep an eye
down
on them
and spy on his friends, see what they're doing. And yeah, it's very deranged paranoia type behavior.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he accuses them of kind of conspiring against him, and they obviously aren't conspiring because they're kind of, at this point, they're more worried about his well-being than the money, but the money is still always looming around there. The money's still always a constant, threat and reminder of what they've done. So
it's kind of like the tall tale heart.
Yeah, it really is.
In a way. Yeah, the Edgar Allan Poe story, it kind of has that feel to it. Yeah.
So what ends up happening after this, because nothing violent happens at this point, but what ends up happening after this is the bodies are discovered.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, Alex, who works for the newspaper, has to go cover the story.
This is your big. This is your big scoop. This is your big chance.
Yeah, your big scoop. It's very interesting. Kind of another comedic situation where he's called in to see the boss, and the boss goes, he asks. He didn't ask him about the bodies, but there's like these three bodies. He's like, I didn't know anything about them. He's like, of course you don't know. I'm telling you this now. So he goes there, and of course, there's all kinds of news reporters, there's police, there's crime scene people, there's coroners, there's whatever. It's a crime scene, it's a murder. These people are grisly. They call them these are grisly murders that are, the bodies are destroyed beyond recognition, all the gory details. And he's sitting there hearing the police captain or whomever just talk to the reporter saying, we can do, we're going to find the identities, and then once we know the identities, we'll tell you about them and all that kind of stuff. And he freaks out and basically runs away. And he runs home. And while this is all happening, Juliet and David become closer.
Yeah.
Right. Romantically closer. And
this is where you see
Juliet's
kind of aligning herself with
I think it's, that's why I'm not, it's not, I don't think it's genuine.
No,
I think, like you're saying, I think it's strategic.
Yeah.
She's aligning herself with someone who has the money, or whom she believes has the money.
The money / seems to be the more physically, capable man in the house. Because Alex isn't, this guy is obviously scaring Alex. David's scaring out. He's not going to be able to.
Yeah, there is that whole alpha male-ness theme that's throughout the film. I guess it's kind of cropping up here, and she is, I guess, aware of it.
And what do women do? What do women do?
What
do women do? They always go for the alpha male.
Not necessarily, but I mean, It's not the. This isn't the Animal Kingdom. It's not Lion
We
King.
are animals.
That's true. But she does it because she has that contingency plan of wanting to get out of the country.
Sure.
She wants to go to Rio de Janeiro.
But David knows about it.
Oh yes,
he found the ticket.
Does.
He found the ticket.
Yeah, which he reveals later. Yeah, so Alex comes home and it's like, oh, I've seen like you two have gotten closer. Da, 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 da. He picks up on that right away.
Yeah.
And isn't this the scene? No, it was the scene before was the one where I wanted to point this out. Really forgot. Where after he comes down the stairs, Alex threatens him with a drill, and he drills a little tiny like cut into his forehead. Which kind of remains there.
Kind of symbolizes that he knows what's in his mind.
Yeah.
Like a peephole, like he's using the peepholes to keep an eye on them, and he puts a little hole in his head, like, I know what you're thinking. Like, I know what you're going to try to do.
Yeah, so like I said, Alex comes home and, basically shows them, hey, have you read the newspaper today? And they're like, it's like, yeah, we got this. We saw it on the TV.
It's all in control. They don't have anything. There's no way they can connect it to us.
Yeah, they don't have anything. There's nothing to connect them to them. And then the inspectors come. The detectives show up again. This is now a second time, and they're denying everything. They're like they show them the 3 pictures because obviously they've identified the bodies. And they're like, do you know these 3 men? And they're like, nope, never seen these people before. I think they interview them individually. We only see them interview Juliet and Alex and not David. Or I can't remember if they saw all 3. But yeah, that's that they interview all of them, and obviously at this point they are now beyond paranoid to the point where they're just, things are reaching a fever point.
Yeah.
A fever pitch here. And basically, David decides that he's going to skip out without them one night. I think it's the morning or the night. No, I think it's in the middle of the night. Yeah, it's in the middle of the night. He packs his bags. He's getting ready to go. He's got the money case. He takes it out of the water. He's ready to go. What I really like about every time they went and put the money in, or put the case in the water, or took it out of the water, or just like looked at it. There's this great camera angle shot of like inside the container below the case, so you can kind of like see them like looking in. It's kind of like a trunk shot, but it's not a trunk, it's a giant water thing. Arrow doesn't really like that shot, so he takes the money.
I was gonna say, it's funny. It's funny usually the symbolism of water in movies is the sense of cleanliness, healing, and
cleansing.
The cleansing of stuff, and it seems the money is their cleansing. Is their.
I guess, yeah. What's interesting is that the money is literally dirty money.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They got, it was either gotten through a robbery.
It's like the cleanest.
Whatever. Now it's like causing all this.
The cleanest thing in this scenario is the money.
yeah. The money's just a tool. Not even a tool. It's a MacGuffin almost. Yeah. It's just a thing that's in the plot that everyone's revolving around. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or trying to get. And in the scene, like they're literally, it's kind of what causes all these problems. In the scene, David gets caught, leaving with the money. Because, the plan was that he and Juliet were going to go together. And then Juliet says, oh, you're leaving without me. And, Alex comes out. And then this is when David confronts her about the plane ticket to Rio de Janeiro. Which
Alex was about to call the cops.
Yes, he was. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
He took the phone into the other room. Yeah. I don't remember phone lines being that long.
It's a long phone line. Yeah.
To the point where you could carry it across an apartment and into another room. How long is this phone line? Thing goes on for a mile. So yeah, he takes it and he tries to call. He calls the detective, and
he's not
gets his answering service.
Yeah, and the cop said he could call him anytime.
Yeah, I know. It's like you think you would have like an emergency number, like I'm not in my office right now, but if it's an emergency, call da 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 da, or whatever it is. And no, guess that's not the case.
Terrible cop.
Yeah, yeah. I guess he doesn't really take his job too seriously. He's only like a murder homicide detective. So yeah. So basically, David notices that the phone's in the other room. He's like, Alex, come out. He's like grabs the phone line and yanks it so that the phone goes across the room, and then they come out. And this is when we have the final confrontation of these three quote unquote friends. Because by this point, are they really friends, or are they just mostly three people on the verge of killing each other over this money? That's kind of where they are at this point. They went from like best friends to bitter enemies, all because of money.
Yeah.
So they basically get in this gigantic fight where.
Well, I mean, the David character punches.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Juliet.
It starts off with David hitting Juliet. Alex comes in and says, you shouldn't have done that. So he kind of grabs him on the back, and then they kind of fight all over the apartment. They end up in the kitchen, which of course are where all the fun things are that you can use to harm one another.
Yes.
and they're getting like at one point Alex puts David's head in the fridge, and he just slamming the door on it so his glasses like fall off. Someone gets slammed on the table. Someone gets slammed, of course, where there happens to be sharp objects. Some knives kind of go flying around. At one point, David has Alex pinned down on the floor. He's got his arms pinned. He's got everything. He's basically dead to rights. So he grabs one of the kitchen knives, stabs him through the shoulder area. It's not a fatal blow.
No, he tries to probably
shoulder.
He probably tried to hit him in the heart, but missed.
Yeah, but he missed pretty bad. It's up below, like the upper.
It's the collarbone area.
Yeah, he gets him in there, right? And of course it hurts.
Yeah. He's stuck to stab. It went through into the floor.
Yes, it does. Not yet.
Well, not into the floor yet, but it's definitely through his back.
It's through his sweater. There's that one like inserted shot of the knife like kind of
poking through the sweater,
through his sweater.
Yeah.
But
then as that happens, right after that happens, then Juliet stabs David through the neck.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome.
It's pretty awesome.
Well, David's about to go in for the kill because he got another knife, and then Juliet stabs him through the neck, and you see like the knife pops out through where his Adam's apple is, and then he obviously keels over because that's kind of a fatal blow for the most part. And then you think that maybe she's gonna help out her friend Alex.
Being a doctor, she could probably, maybe.
Yeah, that oath that those doctors take, she really threw that out the window.
She takes her shoe. Yeah, she takes her shoe off and decides to beat it in further.
Oh yeah, she decides to beat the knife in further. So that it does end up sticking into the floor.
Yeah.
So he's pinned there and bleeding to death slowly too, mind you. And then she takes the case and she leaves. And I believe it then cuts to
he's laying there. He's laying there on the floor.
The crime scene investigators are taking photographs of him. People are walking around, and there's a little narration with Ewan McGregor. That is kind of a mirror or kind of coming full circle from the opening of the film, which also had narration from him as well, which is something they used heavily in Trainspotting, which would be Danny Boyle's next film after this one. So yeah, they're taking pictures, and then there's a cutaway shot of Juliet just freaking out in the car. She's just she's screaming and she's just beside herself, and not knowing the situation or what's about to be revealed, you could have assumed that it was her raging about the actions of what just happened.
Yeah.
Her committing murder, her literally leaving her other friend to die, all that kind of situation. But no, sitting next to her in the passenger seat is the open suitcase full of newspaper clippings that
were of the crimes that they committed.
Yeah, coincidentally of the crimes that they committed. And there was a moment earlier in the film before this kind of climactic event that showed Ewan McGregor's character cutting, like the newspaper, like cutting like sheets of newspaper.
Yeah.
So this is obviously what that was for. And the film ends with, and in the film, and then we see a shot of Ewan McGregor, who is still there on the floor, and then there's the camera pans.
Well, this
down
was a weird thing to me because
Go on.
taking a picture of him and he's still on the floor with the knife through his. Is he actually alive, or is this like?
I think he's dead.
Is he? Yeah, that's what I think.
Dead.
I think so too. I
think he's dead. And it's just a Danny Boyle playing with surrealism.
Yeah.
In that moment, that's what I think. Because I rewinded a few times to see if there was a quick shot of just showing him dead, and there isn't. He's like awake through the whole thing.
Yeah. Because you don't leave somebody that's hurt on the floor and take pictures of them. That's not how it works.
No. The ambulance, the rescue workers would come in and get him out of there really quickly, or tend to him very quickly. So there, like I said, there's a panning shot of below him, where all of the money is underneath the floorboards in the kitchen.
So who do you think did that? Do you think it was
Alex.
David? Is David did it, or I mean, it doesn't really matter. You think Alex did it? When did Alex have time to do that?
I do not know, but I know Alex did it because there's no way David would be leaving with the
well, sure.
money.
I mean, he's the one that put the.
He was like halfway out the door.
I mean, it makes sense,
I
guess, because he's the one that put the newspapers in the thing. He was the one cutting up the newspapers.
Right.
But
I think it was Alex.
Yeah. I guess it would be. It just I'm trying to think of when he could have gotten to the money.
We never saw it. We honestly never saw it, and that's another kind of negative I have with the film is that you have to like. There's like holes in it that you have to fill in yourself.
Yeah.
And which is not necessarily the worst thing a film can do, but there are like serious kind of like plot like little empty
some things
holes kind of
the
fill in.
convenience some of the conveniences you
Some
have
of
to
the convenience like that are really like how did they know, like how did the detectives know to go interview these three people after they identified who the bodies were? Was there evidence that evidence that
the only thing that
connected the crime?
The only thing that kind of connected them was that they said that the cars of the two criminals were outside their apartment. The two that were killed.
But they could have literally. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they were the ones. You know what I mean? Like there could have been. Those criminals could have gone into another building.
Sure.
Or they could have gone into another apartment place. Or
it's a little
they
convenient.
Could just dump the car there. There's a lot of plot conveniences, and it's a lot of kind of not holes, but like you said, conveniences. Also, like for me, like just the general crux of the main event of the guy dying and the money being left. I mean, there was a way I think you could have kept the money and still have just had the guy be taken away through legal means. I don't think you had to have him. You had to like cut up and dispose of his body.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I mean, granted, I think that they just didn't want this guy's name in newspapers or on the news or anything like that because I guess they didn't want anybody coming around asking about him. I guess they wanted it to be like, oh, he was never here at all.
Yeah.
But if their main goal was just to have the money, you could have just taken the money and called the police and been like, hey, this guy just died in our flat. He died in our flat. I mean, this is, we didn't do anything. It's not like they killed him. Or anything. Yeah. Not like there was nothing about that guy that would lead to any suspicion of murder.
Sure.
He wasn't stabbed, he wasn't shot, he wasn't bludgeoned to death or anything like that. So it's kind of just a plot contrivance just to set our characters down this dark road that I think's a little shaky to start out with, but I overall really like the film a lot.
Sure.
I mean.
It's a good first movie from a director.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've seen worst first movies from directors. So yeah, I mean there are worse. And it just kind of, goes to show that the first films are kind of a director's trying out period. You know what I mean? Like they're really trying out, like we said earlier, to define or refine their,
Well,
their style.
Boyle was working in TV, so he wasn't completely a newbie, but when it came to film, this was his first, feature film. So, yeah.
Right. And features are different than TV, and
there's a different flow, different production. As we talked about production in our last episode, it's a different way of TV and movie production are very different. So,
and I'm just thinking of this. There's this scene in the film towards the later on where it's kind of this nightmare scene that Alex is having, where it looks like he's crawling around somewhere. And I don't know if that's to indicate to us that that's when he hid the money away, because he went and got it from the loft and then hid it away. I'm not sure, but yet again, the film ends in a very mysterious and tragic ending.
Yeah.
And to go with what you were saying, is Alex dead or alive? I get one could make the argument that he maybe is still alive, perhaps. I mean, it wasn't a fatal wound.
It just seemed the scenario seemed a little out of place that the cops would just leave him stabbed on the floor and take pictures and start dusting the place and not tend to the person that's still alive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
what I mean. It could have been. You're right. That's the one thing where I think it's playing with.
I agree with you. I think because Danny Boyle has went on to do other movies where surrealism kind of plays a part.
Oh yeah, definitely in Train Spotting, in Trance.
Yeah.
His filmography is very diverse.
Yeah.
Very diverse. His 90s filmography is very interesting. It's we got Shallow Grave, we got Train Spotting, we have what is considered his worst film. Worst film, that's, subjective, of course, but that would be, where is it? Oh, The Beach, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, which came out 2000, not technically 90s.
It's okay.
Yeah, I believe it's based on a novel, and I think it was the second time he'd worked on, previous, work in a previous medium, because Train Spotting is a novel.
Yeah.
But this film is also kind of a series of firsts, like we said. It's in, his first feature, Ewan McGregor's first feature, but it's also the feature debut for the writer John Hodge, who wrote a bunch of Danny Boyle stuff. Not only Shallow Grave, but he did screenplays for Train Spotting, The Beach, Trance, and T2 Train Spotting, or Train Spotting 2. They should have just called it Train Spotting 2. That T2 thing, that's kind of ridiculous. Because it's only reserved for one T2.
Yeah, Judgment Day.
Judgment Day.
Yeah. But, I mean, I really enjoyed watching this again. It's a very interesting first film, and it's always cool to go back and see filmmakers that are, considered kind of masters now and go back and look at their early stuff. It's always fun to go back and see what that was like.
Yes, and the film is available to watch on DVD, on Blu-ray, from the Criterion Collection.
Yep.
The Criterion came out in June of 2012, and it was probably one of the first Criterions I ever bought at the Barnes & Noble.
Yep, me too.
Biannual Criterion sale, because it had just come out, and that was actually probably my first big sale. I had gone there a year before, but 2012 is when I started collecting them in bulk. Buying 5-6 titles at a time, at these store visits, and this was one of the first ones I got, and I probably hadn't watched it since then, because back then my collection wasn't as big as it was now. So when I bought things, I would watch them right away, as opposed to just letting them sit around for months, which is something I do now because I've got such a backlog of things to watch. But yeah, so this was one of the first ones I bought, and it's got some really good special features. It's got 2 audio commentaries by Danny Boyle and screenwriter John Hodge, and producer Andrew McDonald, which I think was also his first producerial credit, I think, is Shallow Grave as well. New interviews with Eccleston, Carrie Fox, Ewan McGregor. 93 documentary about the making of the film. There's a video diary from the making of the film. Of course, there's the lovely trailer and train spotting teaser because
yes.
Well, can't wait till train spotting comes out.
But
and of course, there's a booklet with an essay by critic Philip Kemp. So yeah, that's the Blu-ray in a nutshell. It's a really, really good film that I highly recommend people to watch because I wasn't even aware that it existed until, like, I bought it. Like, I'm like, Shallow Grave, what's that? Oh, it's filmed by Danny Boyle. And by that point,
Slumdog Millionaire had just come out and he won Best Director.
Yeah, that was, it was a few years after that. So yeah, I knew very well who Danny Boyle was. By that point, I had probably seen a couple of his films. I probably had definitely seen Slumdog by that point. I probably definitely seen 28 Days Later. This was 127 Hours had come out already.
I mean,
so
you
I
probably
had
seen,
seen
28 Days Later.
What's that?
28 Days Later.
Yeah, what did I say?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, 28 Days Later. Yeah.
You said 127 Hours.
Which
is also Danny Boyle, but
that is true. All right.
Well, that's gonna be that's. I think that's gonna.
Is that about good? Yeah.
I think we covered it. Where can we find you, Andrew?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions.
And you can find me on Facebook, Stephen Billings. You can also find all the goodies I buy on our Cinema Discovery Project Instagram. We also have the audio for this podcast on our YouTube channel. You can find it on Podbean, Apple Podcast, and that will be it for this episode of the Cinema Discovery Project. Thank you for listening, and hey, keep on watching them movies.
I know I will.